Welcome to the Dad Task Force. This is a new addition for this podcast, and we're going to try to do this once a month. But this is hard talks, and this is subject matter that you may not be comfortable with. You may be, you try to avoid because it's messy and you don't really want to deal with it. And it's going to range from today's episode on suicide all the way to sex, dating, and the uncomfortable stuff that we deal with when we talk about our kids. But before we get started, a special shout out to our sponsor, Stream Kits, who is providing the camera that you see both of us on. And I just talked to Sarkis today, and he said, hey, he's got a new batch coming in. Get your pre-orders in now, and if you do Task Force 35, he'll know that you're affiliated with us, and it helps get you your stuff faster. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
What's up, man? So it's been a minute since I was out of town last week, and we did a two for 2 weeks ago, so we really haven't connected. You had a birthday recently.
Had a birthday yesterday, yeah.
I wasn't going to put your business out there.
Oh, yeah. It's all right. I'm on the back half of 35, or the 30s now. So,
and I guess I'm on the uphill climb. I'm 40s, so there. Thanks for that.
I'm at 35 and older, I think you can just start saying you're only as old as you feel.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, I felt like I was 80 since I was 19. Because these conversations suck, the hard ones. What are we doing for? Let's talk about encouragement stuff first. Do you have any encouraging things, dad achievements, dad stuff?
Yeah, actually, I had a couple. One, I did nothing to earn this one. My 5-month-old's first word, dada.
Hey, that's the biggest accomplishment you can get.
There we go. 1 out of 4. I got 1 out of 4.
That's so funny. With my third, every time I would see him, it was just dad. Just
Yeah.
Just I was pushing it for that one. So,
like a blast shot.
I want to say we were 1-1, and the third one was going to break the tie.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you had to do it.
Yeah.
Other win. Interestingly enough, we talked about fighting a couple weeks ago, and my girls got into a fight 2 nights ago.
All right.
And instead of coming in like fire and brimstone, I took a breath and I was like, we're going to handle this. It's going to go the way I expect it to go. Right. Talked him through it. And then it ended my 5-year-old is totally remorseful at the end. And I was like, this went way better than expected.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Congratulations on
Thanks.
that success. Look, I want to be very clear. I am a person just like everybody else, and I have strong feelings like everybody else. I was out of town, and my kids' baseball team lost their first game in 3 years.
Oh, that's tough.
I was very disappointed. However, earlier this week, we got to replay that team, and we beat them 11-0.
Statement win.
I am fallible and a jerk. But you know what? And so just to put a pin on this one, I get needing kids to have some experience and going from places to places. But if you've got kids that don't love the game, they're not invested into practice, they're not invested when they show up to the game, the last thing I want to do is put them in a position of failure. Because that's going to, one, put stress on them. It's going to make them not want to be a part of it, especially if they're losing, and they weren't losing until they got put in that position. And I want them to be successful. So until they're built up to be successful, I don't put kids in positions. So I don't agree with moving people around during the middle of a game. And that's just as a dad comment. You do what you got to do. You run your own team. But as far as my team's concerned, I like to have kids in the right places so that it builds confidence, it builds skills, and it makes them feel accomplished.
Absolutely.
What's better? You want to lose, but you got to play it cool. I remember as a kid, They're like, hey, you're pitching. I'm like, I'm not a pitcher. They're like, you're in a pitch. You wanted to pitch. It's like, no, I wanted to learn how to pitch. Nobody taught me how to pitch. I don't want to pitch. You got to go. You got to go pitch.
Yeah.
And I did a very bad job. I am not a pitcher. And at the end of the game, not only did we lose, but as the pitcher, I lost. And I'm like, I don't want to ever do this again.
Yeah.
Put me in the outfield.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Anyways, so a couple of other real quick announcements. This is going to come out this week. So this week you're going to get 2 episodes where I want to fast track these things. Instead of being a week out, we're going to do the week of. So we'll record on a Wednesday. It'll come out on a Thursday, which means this will come out tomorrow. And then next week's will come out next week. Instead of the week launch, we initially were trying to have like a back catalog, but honestly, it's juggling family and juggling work and all these other things. It's difficult to get time to build a back catalog. So we're just going to do it as close to live as possible. And maybe one day when we have a big enough audience and we can, this can be our full-time job, we'll just go live and we'll just live and then throw it on YouTube and audio later that night. But for the foreseeable future, that's not going to happen. All right. I took notes. This is how professional we're getting.
Yeah.
Notes.
Got talking notes.
Let's talk about suicide. Do you have any experience?
I do, actually. One of my good friends in college, fraternity brother, committed suicide when we were in college. So
it's tough.
That is, it was very tough.
I had, personally, I've had 3. I had a kid I went to high school with lived next door, and then a kid in the Army killed herself in Iraq, and then last year an academy mate from the police academy killed himself.
Wow.
So it's and then professionally, you working as a cop, you run into it quite a bit, and I worked in a community where it was mostly adolescent suicide, which is why it's a very important thing to me to talk about. And we talk a lot about it in the courses that we teach for my full-time job. But this is something that I think dads need to be involved with, because we're going to go over some stats. And I just want to, I sent them to you so you can see them, but I want to catch your reaction and your feedback on some of this. So this is mostly from 2023, and I will actually link all of these stats in the description if you want to fact check me. But 19 and a half teens aged 12 to 17, so 1 in 5, had a major depressive episode in the last year from SAMHSA. 42% of high school students reported feelings of sadness and hopelessness in the past year. Now, that percentage is an average. It's higher in females at 57%, 46% for Hispanic males, 49% for multiracial students, and 69% for the LGBT students, and that's of 2023. Among college students, 36% have been diagnosed with anxiety and 30% have been diagnosed with depression. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for teens and young adults, and that's ages 10 to 34, and how it's aggregated. Now, just for clarification, that means that's number 2. Number 1 is unintentional accidents. Car crashes, being stupid, things like that.
Right.
1 in 5, or 22% of high school students have reported seriously considering suicide in the past year, and it goes up for females to 30%, American Indians and Alaska Natives at 27%, and the LGBT students at 45%. And 1 in 10 high school students have attempted suicide in the last year. That percentage is highest amongst females at 13%, 16% for American Indians and Alaska Natives, and 14% for black teens, 22% for the LGBT students. And that's all from the CDC, mostly from the CDC, and of 2023. So that's just the stats. Now, we'll get into some of the other stuff in a minute, but where are you landing? How do you feel about those statistics?
It's, on one level, it's super shocking that at like the high school level, it's 1 in 5 kids have experienced like depression, and I forget the number, but a high number of kids have experience like hopelessness or like a feeling of hopelessness.
Oh, for sure.
And so you'd think like, I don't know, I coached high school sports for a long time. It's crazy to think like I had just my defensive backs. There's 15, 20 of them. That means like 4 of those kids were dealing with something.
Just on numbers alone.
Just on numbers alone. Yeah.
And that's helpful. Professional, Brad. Sorry. No, that's a really good way to look at it. You look at reflecting on just the kids that you've interacted with, and you're now like, oh shit, that's a much larger number than I expected.
Right.
Now I started diving into these numbers, and it got into a place that I wasn't expecting. So I actually started seeing, have they done research to determine if there's a correlation to suicide, depression, and anxiety and fatherlessness.
Okay.
So in the UK, take it for what it's worth. It's a UK study. It's not the same, but people are people, right?
Right.
And I'm just going to read this excerpt. It's from the National Library of Medicine. They found evidence that father absence in childhood is persistently associated with offspring depression in adolescence and early adulthood. This relationship varies by sex and timing of a father's departure, with early childhood father absence emerging as the strongest risk factor for adverse offspring mental health trajectories. Further research is needed to identify mechanisms that could inform preventative interventions to reduce the risk of depression in children who experience father absence. Not to be a dick, but how about we just stop being absentee fathers?
Yeah, just be there.
A man can leave a hole, or he can leave a legacy. And that hole gets filled up with all sorts of things, and sometimes it creates bigger holes.
Yeah.
Now, moving on. From ScienceDaily.com, the researchers that found that adolescents whose fathers were more rejecting tended to have more social anxiety later on, and in turn experienced more loneliness. Imagine that. Daddy doesn't love me. Daddy doesn't want to spend time with me. Now I don't know how to interact and hang out with other people.
Why would anybody else want to if my dad doesn't want to?
Continuing, we found that father rejection predicted increases in adolescent social anxiety even when we controlled for social anxiety at an earlier time. In turn, this predicted increases in loneliness later on, said Mack, the scientist. This suggests that fathers' rejecting attitudes towards their adolescent children may make them more nervous about approaching social situations, which in turn related to more social isolation and feelings of loneliness. Now, having worked in suicide intervention and prevention, I speak on this around the country at professional trainings for schools, companies, and law enforcement. There are typically 2 predictive indicators for suicide. Isolation being one of them. So you can have one and not the other and have a high probability, but if you have both, you have a high lethality probability, right? Isolation is the first one. When you start to look at young adults and at older adults, you want to look at, do they have purpose, right? But with kids, we tend to look at, do they feel pressure to conform to society, pressure to conform to mom and dad's like regimented structure and rules? Does my significant other pressure me to do something that challenges my identity? And I say that last piece because when you get to be an adult and you look at purpose, your purpose is tied to your identity. So am I doing the thing that I believe makes me who I am? Did I do something that challenges that perspective? When we look at veterans and first responders, a lot of the time the suicide comes when their identity gets challenged. And you get that hopelessness and that depression and those feelings of just shit ain't okay.
Right.
So as a father, we have a lot of responsibilities. Now, there's so much data, so bear with me. Sorry, not to hog this show. 10 facts about father engagement from allforkids.org, which is just a parent support website. Fathers and infants can be equally as attached as mothers and infants. When both parents are involved with the child, infants are attached to both parents from the beginning of life. Interesting, right? That's not what you normally see.
Right.
Father involvement is related to a positive child health outcome in infants, such as improved weight gain in preterm infants and improved breastfeeding rates. Father involvement using authoritative parenting, loving with clear boundaries and expectations, leads to better emotional, academic, social, and behavioral outcomes for kids. So I love you, but you did wrong. Here's the boundary. Here are the expectations. Guess what? Your kid becomes successful.
Right.
So shocking.
Right.
Doing the one thing that you should be doing anyways. Children who feel a closeness to their fathers are twice as likely as those who do not enter college or find stable employment after high school. 75% less likely to have teen birth, 80% less likely to spend time in jail, and half as likely to experience multiple depression symptoms.
Crazy.
Fathers occupy a critical role in child development. Father absence hinders development from infancy through childhood and into adulthood. The psychological harm of father absence experienced during childhood persists throughout the life course. Number 6, the quality of father-child relationship matters more than the specific amount of hours spent together. Non-resident fathers can have a positive effect on a child's social and emotional well-being, as well as academic achievement and behavioral adjustment. So it's about being present in the moments that you have time to be present.
Right.
And then there's some pieces on grades. I'm going to post the link so you can actually check, but I want to, in the interest of time, move on to some of the more other stuff. From the AmericanFirstPolicy.com, across America in 2022, data indicated that there are approximately 18.3 million children who live without a father in the home, comprising 1 in 4 children.
Wild.
And we are doing a horrible job as dads.
Right.
But not everybody. Just
not everybody.
But that 3 in 4 kids don't have a father figure in their home.
Right.
80% of single parents' homes are led by, guess?
Mother.
Single mother. Children from single parent families are twice as likely to suffer from mental health and behavioral problems as those living with married parents. Now, I recognize that sometimes people can't make it work, and that's neither here nor there. That's not what we just saw earlier is that you can still be present and be successful in parenting, whether or not you
don't have to live there.
Yeah, you don't have to live there.
Yeah.
In one study, 70% of youth in state-operated facilities were from single-parent homes. Those are fostering systems.
Right.
Those are juvenile detention facilities. 70%, 7 out of 10. These are numbers. This isn't even like I'm making a political stance. This is just information that we're giving you.
Right.
Children with actively engaged fathers perform much better in school, and some data suggests that they are 30% less likely to repeat a class and 43% more likely to get A's. That actually comes up multiple times throughout all of the research that we looked at. And then in a study of 56 school shootings, only 10 of the shooters were raised in a stable home with both biological parents, meaning 82% grew up in either an unstable family environment or grew up without both biological parents together.
It's a lot of mind-blowing stuff in there.
Makes my freaking head hurt.
Yeah.
So, social and emotional wellness. It's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's not a liberal conservative thing. You're reaching down as the man of the household or the leader of your family. Even if you're separated from your wife, you're still leading your children, which is your family. And you are investing into their health and welfare.
Yeah.
I'm going to play a game with you real quick. You didn't even know this is going to happen. I have a partner at work, and he likes to use this. So I don't have permission, but I think he'll be all right with it. What do you call somebody with a mental illness? Like, what are some words people throw around in just public forum?
Mentally ill, sick, Those are like probably the two main ones that come to mind. Crazy. Yeah.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Looney Tunes.
Cuckoo. Missing a screw loose.
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
The hitch in a giddy up. What do you call somebody that has cancer?
Sick.
Survivor.
Yeah.
Brave. Strong.
Complete opposite.
Yeah. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, did the cancer patient choose to have cancer?
Nope.
Did the person with schizophrenia choose to have schizophrenia? So why do we look at mental health stuff as a weakness?
Right. That also creates the stigma of like not wanting to talk about it. And
absolutely.
Not wanting to tell anybody what you're going through. So.
And it's, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
All right. Coming back into it. So with all that information, how does it make you feel as a dad?
Makes me feel a lot more, I don't know if important's the word, but definitely, more important. Like my presence is way more impactful than I even previously thought. And even not as like a father, like of my own children, just like a father figure to kids. Cause if that many kids like don't have a father at home, like, I know I'm Christian, you're Christian. Yeah. It's not a religious thing, but it's like, there's a reason that kid is in front of you in that moment, or that kid is in your life.
And absolutely. And let's just be real clear, real quick. Your religious faith doesn't make you a good person.
Right.
It says that I believe in something, or at least I subscribe to an ideology. And I've seen plenty of Christians who are horrible fathers. We used to run into people all the time like, well, I go to church. All right, when's the last time you talked to your kid?
Right.
Oh, we don't get along. Why don't you get along? Like, you should be repairing that relationship.
Yeah.
One of the other aspects we look at is being present. And like, this is not what we're talking about today, but I'm going to use this tablet as an example. But if my kid runs in like, Daddy, I want to go play baseball. I'm like, ugh. You know what? I'm busy, and I'm scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, or I'm checking an email, or I'm doing something. Like, that's not being present. Yeah, I'm living in the same house with you. I'm sitting in the same room with you, but we're not connected.
No.
Well, we'll go back to isolation real quick. We talk about when I would do these assessments with kids, and they were in California, it's called a 5150. It's danger to self or others, or gravely disabled as a result of a mental illness. I would, those are I fast track those two things: isolation, pressure. Right? Well, who are your friends? Well, I don't have any. Okay. Do you spend time on social media? Yeah. Well, do you know any of those people? No.
Nope.
Well, I see you hanging out with people at school. Do you hang out with it? Like, who? Like, aren't they your friends? No. I don't feel like, so even if they have people that they are around, if there's not a connection,
right,
there's a feeling of loneliness, and therefore isolated. It doesn't have to be actual; it can be perceived, because a person's perception is their reality. Not to take away from objective truth, but if I don't feel like, if I can walk into a room with 100 people, and if I don't know anybody. Yeah, sure, there's 100 people around, but I'm not connected.
Right.
I can still feel lonely. That's my perception of that moment. We have to internalize those feelings and realize that.
Right.
Do you ever, as a dad, like, your kid will say something and you're just like, that's not right. That's not true. Like, I know that's not true because I've been there. I've done that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, me too. And as I say this out loud, I'm like, I didn't consider their perspective.
Right. And a lot of what you were just saying, I was thinking like when you're scrolling on the iPad, right? Like to you, it might just be like, oh, I'll give them some attention in a minute. But the kid's view is like, oh, that tablet's more important than me.
Oh my gosh.
So. Nail
Nail on head. And just as a real quick one, right? Here's the thing. If you have work to do and you're doing work and your kid's like, Daddy, I want ice cream, or whatever it is they want, right? And you're like, hey, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a boundary and expectation. I need 2 minutes to finish this email, and then I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to get you whatever you need. That is a very easy way to do that. You don't, now what you've done, you're like, all right, great. They heard me. I feel relevant.
Right.
But I understand they also have to pay the bills, so.
Yeah. I also want my dad to be able to pay for the ice cream.
Right. So that is that's the data. What I want to be intentional with these hard talk episodes is, and I'm gonna throw you under the, not the bus, but I'm gonna put you on the spot in just a second because I put an asterisk down here of other people's kids.
Okay.
Now our conversations have been like, I'm going to talk about, my background is communication and talking to people, emotional intelligence, well-being, things like that. You have a great resume of coaching and mentoring and dealing with not only your kids, but also other people's kids, to where you're a trusted adult with trust, and they come to you with information. So as we go through this, I just want to see what your experience has been, because I can tell you what my experience is, and if it's different, then we have multiple options for people that actually listen and watch. Number one, if you start to get the inclination that there's something going on with your child, you need to have, and you decide we have to have this conversation. What is the right location? We're excited to announce our very first sponsor of the Dad Task Force, which is StreamKits.com, where you go and get high-end audio-visual production equipment that's affordable and easy to use. If you're a streamer or a content creator, this is for you. You can go to Amazon, you can buy that camera, you can buy all those cables and the microphones and the stands and the tripods and the lights and the software. But you know what happens when you put all that together and it doesn't sync up real well and your file gets corrupted? You gotta refilm it. But with StreamKits, it all sets up and syncs together, and you can go live right from your device, or you can just record it static and go take care of it in post. The choice is yours because it's integrated into itself. And with promo code TaskForce35, you get 35% off MSRP at checkout. If you want to create a cooking show, StreamKits for you. If you want to show people how to fix cars in your garage, StreamKits for you. It is so simple to get started, to get your vision, your goal, your dream, everything out there and going right now. You don't have to break the bank. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you've saved so much money with StreamKits and the Dad Task Force promo code of TaskForce35. You can reinvest that money that you saved into your dream, into your goal, into your company, into your brand. StreamKits.com. with promo code TaskForce35. Because that's the first step, is to choose the right location. For you, where would you have, like, you see maybe it's a kid on your team, or since your kids are young.
Yeah.
What's a good location to have these conversations?
Definitely somewhere that the kid feels safe. So like not some rando place that they've never been before. So, I mean, a lot of time is spent football fields, softball fields, that kind of thing. So it's usually like right there on the spot, somewhere on the field. Like if the kid plays shortstop, for example, and we're going on the water break and I notice something, like I'm going to tell everybody to go on a water break. I'm going to meet that kid like right around shortstop and talk to them there. Also important that like other kids can't hear, because kids are super nosy. Even if like you don't think that they're within an earshot, like they're trying to eavesdrop. And so that kid also knows like other kids are nosy. So they're going to be super cognizant if somebody is even possibly within earshot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's great. And I didn't expect you to answer it that way. And so that if you're seeing something and you can handle it in the street or on the field or wherever it is that you are, do it privately.
Right.
Privately in public.
Yeah, not yeah.
It's not your kid. If it is your kid, you have to choose the right location, not in a place that's limited with distractions, a place that they feel safe. Maybe it's their bedroom, maybe it's your room, maybe it's the living room, maybe it's in the car. Hard conversations, depending on the intent of the conversation, will need a different location. Like if you're in trouble because you really messed up and we need to talk about this, the car is a great place to do it because they don't have anywhere else to go.
Right, they're right there.
Now, here's a little bit of nerd science for you. Boys connect better side by side, and girls connect better face to face.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
that's really cool.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Now, open the conversation with probing, open-ended questions. I saw this. What's going on? What was happening? What happened? What do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
And then just sit in the silence and be uncomfortable. Let that silence become uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to avoid like, did this happen? Or did that happen?
Yeah, you definitely want to be accusatory.
Right.
At least not at this phase in the conversation. And you have to be open to new information that's going to be uncomfortable. So, for example, I was doing an intervention and nobody knew this, and we were going into the conversation, we're sitting there, we're developing rapport, and I asked the question, and the response that I got was, yes, I want to kill myself because I was sexually assaulted. And I don't want to tell my parents.
So you got like, not just one, you got two holy crap moments.
Yeah, you're sitting there
right
going,
there.
oh shit. All right, continue.
Yeah.
So, you get two moments of just like,
holy crap.
One, you have a high lethality, and two, you were a victim of a very serious crime. So,
right.
You have to be open to that, and then you can't be like,
right.
You have to be.
I was going to ask you a question because I'm like, you got to be poker face. Like, you can't be shocked by it because then they're going to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't share this with this person.
Right.
So, yeah, like, go on.
No, okay. So, be open to new information. Be honest with your experience and knowledge. Hey, I cannot imagine what you're feeling right now because I haven't felt that, but I want to hear more. So I appreciate you sharing that. Would you please, can you provide more details? Things like that. You just want to encourage that conversation to continue. But if you don't have any background, if you're not like a doctor or a suicide expert or a self-harm expert, what you want to do is recognize that you don't know, and it's okay not to know, but don't pretend that you know.
Right.
And you might even have to do what's called an accusation audit. It's a guy named Chris Voss came up with that idea, and he's like, look, if I have a hard conversation, I'm going to go into it and say, I realize that I haven't been receptive in the past. I've been difficult to talk to. I realize that I did these things wrong, and I'm ready to make things right and do things different.
Yeah.
So that's something that we have to consider. Right?
Yeah.
How do we manage that? So that also sets the tone, because now you've just talked about the concerns that they don't want to engage with. I don't want to talk to you because you're not receptive or you're an asshole. Be willing to listen, not talk.
Right.
Be comfortable with just sitting there like this.
That's when more information comes. That's when the most information comes out.
That's when the most information comes. Be willing to support and seek higher levels of help. And that means even including calling 911 for an emergency crisis eval. Now, in certain states, the police will come and they'll take your kid to the hospital or a psychiatric facility based on probable cause. In other states, they say, well, this is your child. This is your responsibility. This isn't a problem of the state. You called us, take your kid to the hospital. We can take your kid to the hospital, or you can take your kid to the hospital. Either way, your kid needs to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
So seek therapy, seek counseling, seek emergency triage. And we used to teach parenting classes in the school, and when should I call the police? When should I call for support? Should I call for support? And the response I would typically give is like, well, if you start to believe that there's indicators of self-harm, self-destructive behavior, you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Either you seek help or you don't. But what's the cost if you're wrong?
Exactly.
They got help and they didn't need it, or they didn't get help and they absolutely did.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about like teaching it in the schools, because teachers, coaches, anybody who's really like interacting with kids, they're a mandatory reporter for things like harassment, right?
Yep.
But I think like when we think of harassment, we think it's like an outside person harassing the person, like the kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a parent, neighbor, somebody that's not the kid themselves harming the kid. But that harassment is just as much like if that kid is in danger from themselves, you should definitely be doing something and reporting that and getting that kid the help, because worst case scenario, like you said, like the kid had a conversation they didn't have to have.
And so let's just dispel a couple myths as we wrap things up. If somebody is talking about suicide with somebody, does not put the idea in their mind. So like if I'm like, hey, Davon, do you want to kill yourself? And you're and then all of a sudden, oh, I shouldn't have said that because Davon's now going to go and no. You're not going to tell somebody something that they already feel. Right. Number two, please stop asking, do you want to hurt yourself? Are you thinking about harming yourself? And this is why. If a person is truly suicidal and they want to die, they're not harming or hurting themselves. They're solving the problem. They're healing the pain. So you have to be really comfortable with saying, hey, Davon, do you want to kill yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? And when you ask that question, be prepared for the answer.
And you're gonna get the answer because they're probably not expecting you to ask that question.
Be direct and you're the dad. Have some balls to ask the hard question because your kid's at stake.
Right.
That's why we do this. That's one of the biggest reasons we do this is because men are ill-equipped. Nobody gave us a handbook and said, here, read this. This is how you deal with this stuff. This is lived experience. This is knowledge from books. It's a little bit of everything. And we want you to thrive. We want you to be successful. We want your kids to grow up and be the leaders tomorrow. But they got to get there first. And they're not going to get there if you're not doing your job of protecting and providing and being an advocate and resource for your child to be successful.
Absolutely.
I know I talked a lot this episode. What do you got?
No, I mean, what I want to leave off with is it piggybacks on that last little bit that you were talking about, because your kid is at stake, and asking the direct questions are going to be the best way to like nip it in the bud right away. Hindsight's always 20/20, but when I think of like my personal experience with suicide, like the signs were all there, and you know they always are when you're looking back at it. But I guarantee, had I just asked, like, are you thinking about killing yourself, would have probably saved a life.
Yeah.
So
that's probably true. You actually brought up something that we should probably discuss, signs and symptoms or symptomology of it, just what to look for. Hopelessness, loss of pleasure in things that they used to enjoy, not eating, self-harming behaviors such as cutting. Now, cutting is a weird one because some people do it because it causes them some sort of euphoric feeling. Others do it for attention, and others do it to test an attempt. There's not a right way or a wrong way. Cutting is hard and painful, and just understand that if you see it, call for help. Don't be ridiculous. Don't like try to diminish the value of what's happening. Seek professional help.
Yep.
Other things that give stuff away, they become despondent and isolate themselves. Now, kids are going to hang out in their rooms because, gosh, mom and dad, they hate you at that moment. Like, not if you're doing things right.
Right.
I've got a 17-year-old and rarely does she just hide in her room. And it's not my doing, that's my wife's doing. And look, there's nothing that says that you can't turn your relationship you have right now around and make the most out of it with the rest of the time that you have with your child.
Absolutely.
And just because of the content today that we talked about, if you do feel a certain way and you want to talk to somebody, 988 is the National Suicide Hotline. And as always, reach out. Somebody wants to talk to you, whether it's a stranger on the hotline or somebody that loves you and wants you to continue on with life. Hard talks.
Hard talks, but
Hard
necessary talks.
But necessary. All right. Well, see you next time.
Till next time.